Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in again. End of day 2 at the Online Disability Show. Hope you like my studio. Thank you. Not quite ITV, but it's been a fab day. I hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as I have. I hope you've had a chance to take part in some of our clubs and workshops. This is some of the live videos, experts. We've had a jam-packed day. And now, before I collapse in a heap and before I pass on to Kate for her dance workshop later, I want to introduce you to 2 exceptional women. First of all, we have Emily Morison, who for the purposes of this interview will be called Emily M, because I'm obviously Emily G. She blogs under the name AbleEmily. She's a social media queen, blogger, writer, activist, and last November she created a Twitter storm when she got abandoned in a very well-known hotel chain, and I'll let her tell you more about that later, but it resulted in a slot on ITV and The One Show. And hugest welcome, thank you to Baroness Grey-Thompson, Tanni, 11-time gold medalist, crossbench life peer, all-round legend, mum, superstar. I can't believe you've managed to squeeze us into your life with everything else you have, but thank you both and welcome to our strange virtual show. I wish we were in person with a bottle of wine, but until we can do that, here we are on Zoom. Just like to start by asking you both, how are you? Tanni, where are you and how are you under lockdown?
I'm at home in the northeast of England, and you can probably hear my family are in the background, sort of around doing things. I'm in the kitchen. I'm sort of doing okay, actually. I mean, this is the longest I've spent at home in 10 years. So in some ways, it's given me an amazing chance to be at home with my family, work really differently. But then it is weird not being in Parliament and you get so much done by bumping into people in the corridors and, you know, connecting to people that I'm missing some of that. But we've moved Parliament online, which
That's amazing.
Like never in a million years. We had our first completely online debate last week, which was in the House of Lords, not the Commons. So the Lords are leading the way. And it kind of proves what can be done. I think a big thing for me is for years disabled people have been asking for more accessibility and working from home and tech, and everyone's like, no, we can't do it. And then suddenly, yes, they
Absolutely.
can. So it's really important that we we take the good things out of this and not lose those good things.
Yeah. It is amazing, isn't it, how if you had said to the House of Lords, right, we need to do it all online, we need to do a virtual session. Oh, we can't do that. When you have to, it's amazing what you can do. And you're right, what I'm hearing from people who amidst all the negativity and the worry and the fear, there are some amazing things that are emerging out of this, and particularly in the realm of accessibility, happily, which is what we're mostly here today to talk about. Emily, how are you up in Newcastle?
Yeah, I'm good. All the Geordies in one group. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you know, it's being asked to stay at home isn't the worst thing in the world, and to a lot of people it isn't actually anything new. And I think there is some good positives to look at as well. I feel like I'm actually seeing more of some of my friends, and you know, and I don't know, it's just there's definitely some good things, but I appreciate that it can bring with it some trials as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Tanni, I don't know where to start. We could talk to you about so many things, but I wonder if the easiest thing to start, now I'm very aware when in this interview that I'm able, so therefore I come to this conversation as a sort of interested observer. And Emily and I had a little chat earlier, and we were talking about the power of London 2012 and how that seemed to be a turning point in so many areas: accessibility, the conversation, the awareness of disabled people as sort of icons and sporting heroes. And I just wondered what you felt about that, because obviously you were an elite athlete way before London 2012 and here you are still working in the arena now, and I wondered what you felt about that.
I mean, 2012 was amazing and it was a turning point, but I think people forget that games like Barcelona, we had full crowds in the stadium every night, because it was sponsored by ONCE, which is a charity for blind people in Spain. So, and then Atlanta, you know, you could literally name the crowd, you know, like I knew the names of everyone in there one night. And that's sort of slightly worrying. So the games have been through ups and downs, but what was amazing with 2012 is when Seb Coe came in to chair it, he was very clear. It was, you know, one look and feel. It was the games, you know, up until Seb came along, we had to call it the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games. We weren't even allowed to call it the Olympics and Paralympics. So there were lots of very subtle changes. And also there was an amazing team that worked as part of the games, which was looking at accessibility, which people kind of forget now. It wasn't just actually in the stadium was the first time I could actually sit with my whole family to watch a sporting event. But things like they redid the cobbles on South Bank, and you know, they looked at, you know, Green Park being an accessible tube station. So there were lots of things that came because of the games. And it was amazing to see it. But also I think some of the changes that have come on the back are not so positive in that, you know, young disabled people now are just constantly told, oh, do you want to be a Paralympian? And you don't have every non-disabled person that doesn't like sport. So don't say to a disabled child that doesn't like sport. So there are some assumptions that all you can be as a disabled person is a Paralympian. And I'm saying, well, you should be able to be a teacher and a lawyer and, you know, a nurse and a doctor. There's so many more things you can be. Anything, not just settling for being an athlete. So I'd like to see some of that kind of change, because we don't have enough disabled people in politics, in profile job, in any jobs, you know, 50%
management roles,
disabled people are unemployed, and that's not good.
Emily, how do you feel about that? Because obviously you would have watched those Olympics and been very aware of of that. Are you being asked all the time whether you'd like to be the next Sarah Story or Hannah Cockcroft? Has that been your experience?
I mean, it's definitely a feature. I think not everybody, but a lot of people have this vision now of particularly wheelchair users, where you're either really strong and can do anything and you're just like anybody else, or you're really weak and you're vulnerable and you're poorly.
Yeah.
And as a person who's never been particularly sporty, it's kind of difficult because I don't fall into either of those. And does that mean then that I am not a good enough disabled person, or I'm not being inspiring enough? So definitely, like, the Olympics and the Paralympics have changed lots of things, and I think it's brought lots of kind of good attention to disabled people rather than negative press, but there is some drawbacks there for definite.
There's something called inspiration porn, and it's sort of particularly targeted disabled people who do sport, which is like they're all brave and marvellous and wonderful. And yes, some disabled people who become Paralympians have been through very dramatic journeys to get there. Like me, I was born with spina bifida. There was no adversity in my childhood apart from I couldn't walk. And so for me, we need to be celebrating amazing sport, and not just because they're disabled. And sometimes it's quite hard for the people to grasp that, because Emily's right. You're either a Paralympian or you're a benefit scrounger. And then there's the assumption that every disabled person can do what a Paralympian does. But again, we don't go into the mainstream population and say to everyone, well, if you can't deadlift the same as the Olympic weightlifting champion, you have no value. But actually, that's kind of what they're saying to us. So it's really difficult, because we need to have just more disabled people who are just a bit rubbish at doing sport, who do it because they like it, but not good at it. They're not on a pathway. They're just doing it because they want to do it. And that's what we don't have at the minute. We used to have it.
They just want to be a mum. They don't want to be inspirational and a superhero. They just want to be a mum and have a vegetable patch and take their kids to school every day. And that's awesome. That's fine.
Yeah. And that's enough. That's good enough.
Inspiration, you know. Yeah.
No, I don't wake up every day saying, and today I'm going to be inspirational. That's really...
People think that we do that, though. I'm sure there are people... I think it's like, I've seen friends who've said, you know, oh, at the supermarket today, somebody came up to me and said, wow, you're so inspirational, just because they were doing their shopping. It's like, that's not how I want to be viewed. I just want to go about my day.
I'm just because I'm really tempted to go up to a load of random non-disabled people and just say, you're so inspirational. And then you go, oh, and that's a bit mean and nice. And then people don't understand. And, you know, it's just, I don't do this. I've got a friend who does it, who's disabled, and when everyone says to her, "You're inspirational," she'll just say, "Why?" And then, and you know, and for some people, it's really difficult to get dressed every day and get out, and for other people, it's not at all. So it's that assumption that if you've got visible impairment, life must be sad and tragic. I mean, I had someone say to me a while ago, "Oh, you must have thought about killing yourself loads of times because you're like that." Oh, no, not really.
No.
All right, thanks.
Shocking, it's shocking. Think it, don't say it. I mean, you know, really. I meet this a lot. Obviously, a lot of the work I do, I meet mums and dads and carers of young kids, and they say they get really sick of, "Oh, you're amazing." Like, well, not really. I didn't ask to have a child with a disability. I just got one, and I'm making the best of it. I'm trying to keep a smile on my face every day, fighting battles every day. I'm not a superhero. I'm just a parent. I mean, you know, you don't get a choice, and it's so patronising to assume that everyone wants to be viewed as an inspiration. Although I'm sorry to say it, you are, because neither of you have just taken life lying down. And on which note, I want to hear from Emily about this hotel incident. What happened, and how did you take a sort of negative incident and turn it into a media storm? Because this is what we need more of, surely.
Yeah, so I, just as a bit of a backstory, I live in Newcastle, but I head to London for treatment. And last year I was doing that roughly about every 6 weeks. And each time I was staying in the Premier Inn in London, just because that was one of the few places near the hospital I could find that had wheelchair accessible rooms, wet room, etc. So that was suitable for me. So I stayed there quite a bit, but this one time in November, the fire alarm sounded fairly late at night. And so I did what everybody else would do and went to try and evacuate. And when I got to the stairwell, pressed the button. All in all, basically, I was left waiting without kind of any guidance for 45 minutes. While everybody else in the building, which was a few hundred people, because it's a pretty big hotel if you know it, had evacuated and gone outside. The fire brigade had arrived. The staff didn't know why the fire alarm was sounding. It wasn't a test kind of thing. They just weren't sure. They kept kind of saying, "Oh, it might be someone smoking in their room," but they weren't sure. So I was just left waiting. And yeah, so I think the lack of explanation was probably the worst thing about it. But what happened in terms of, so in a normal situation, what you'd expect is that they would then get the evac chair out, because I was on the 4th floor. And you presume really that they have procedures in place, don't you, for, you know, if they've got a disabled room on the 4th floor, you'd think, well, you've obviously thought about how you're going to get out. Yeah. And the staff couldn't find it. They didn't know where it was. They then left us for about 20 minutes, came back, had found the evac chair somewhere downstairs, and then asked me if I wanted to get it in it, and said they'd never been trained in using it. So they then started putting each other in it to see how they would use it, and they kept dropping each other out onto the stairs. So at that point I was like, well, I'm not going to get in there because, you know, I have a condition that causes chronic pain. I don't want to be dropped out on the stairs, but appreciate the effort kind of thing. And at that point as well, they said, "Oh, have you tried getting the lift?" And of course, most people would know that you can't use the lift in a fire situation. So yeah, and there was never any explanation. I didn't feel I ever got a satisfactory response. I decided to tweet about it later that night, and a lot of people will kind of, who do know me from online, will know that that's kind of how I ended up getting the position that I have got, because it ended up with thousands of retweets and shares, and people commenting saying, "Oh, I had that experience too." So yeah, I think I had a choice there, whether I was going to just accept what had happened and move on, or whether I was going to say, actually, no, this isn't okay. And as I found out, it wasn't just me it happened to. Like, how can we move forward from this? I'm not pointing the finger, but I just want to know, how can we make this better, because this isn't good enough.
Oh, goodness. And so I know you tweeted and you got 4,000 retweets, and then you ended up on ITV and ultimately on the One Show. And I think I'm right in saying that there has not really been any response from said hotel chain, unnamed, very large, well-known hotel chain. And as far as you know, despite offering to help them for free, they still have not accepted your invitation or made any improvements that we know of. Tanni, I can see you shaking your head. Is this a familiar story? And what can we, Emily, me, you, do to try and improve things?
Yeah, it's totally. I mean, I've lost count the number of times I've been left on a staircase, or yeah, don't worry, we'll come back and get you. Yeah, but when? And I think for me, I really struggle with the concept of evac chairs. So I say this to everyone: if the flames were 3 foot away from me, I would get in an evac chair, and I'd risk somebody carrying me down the stairs. But then the issue I've got is once I'm outside, and actually evac chairs have really been designed for kind of non-disabled or people with minimal conditions. So, you know, they're really difficult to sit on. They've got bars underneath. You know, once I'm out, but I can't move. I can't do anything. I'm completely and utterly stuck. So I'm then reliant on somebody pushing me around. So for me, they're only useful if the fire's right in front of you. So I think it's really important to know. I mean, when I go to a hotel, I mean, this is Asian experience. I'll say, you know, is it a fire lift? Is it a place of safety, or is it a refuge? Because they're quite different. A refuge has a burn time where you're safe for 8 hours. And, you know, the other is basically a meeting point for the fire brigade to come back and get you. So I think the conversations that hotels should just be much more open about having with people and being honest about it. But there's a really funny sketch on The Office with Ricky Gervais, which has actually got the actress wheelchair user Julie Fernandez in. And they start, you know, there's a fire alarm and they start carrying her down the stairs, and it's quite hard to carry her. So basically Ricky Gervais, I think, says, you know, we'll leave you there and we'll come back for you if there's flames. And you go, that's real. So yeah, it's just happened, you know. And also people's view of accessibility. You know, I've stayed in hotels where they go, oh yeah, we've got an accessible room, and it's at 4 steps. And you go, okay. And they go, oh yeah, but my mother's in a wheelchair and she can walk. Right, but she's not paralysed, is she? So it's some of these things where, you know, it's just not, people, I just don't think. And I think in, you know, cases like Emily's had, it's really important the hotel chains come back and, you know, answer those questions, because, you know, I spend my money in places that are okay to go to. And if I hear stories like this, not only will I tweet and, you know, but I won't go there. And I think for me, social media has been amazing, because around some of the work I do on, you know, campaigning for better train access, it's social media that's changed the perception. You can write as many letters as you want, you can sit in as many meetings as you want, and they have an effect. But actually, if you get lots and lots of retweets, companies start to think differently about how they can do it. And I think the social media teams have to be more responsible. You know, one train company who just got very excited because they launched a new accessible train, you know, it turns out if you're a wheelchair user, you couldn't get to the buffet car, and the response from the social media team was, don't worry, you'll be inside the cafe bar. And, you know, I was going to say slightly very sarcastic response was, wow, in all my years of campaigning, I dreamt of being inside the cafe bar, you know. And I was told it was sarcastic, was like, yeah, well, you know, what, just, you know, so it's think, and, you know, I've tweeted lots of stuff that is not clear or not terribly, you know, thought out. So, you know, I shouldn't throw too many stones. But, you know, the social media teams need to really think about how they engage with people, because that makes a big difference. And responding to complaints is really important. It's good customer service.
Yeah. Well, I always think if someone has made an effort to get in touch with you, you should match that effort in your response, even if it's annoying and uncomfortable. It's just an obligation you have as a business. Yeah. And you're right about the power of social media. I love that you're in the House of Lords, but your preferred method of change is Twitter. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? It's so powerful.
Yeah, it can. It can be really powerful, but especially because people, you know, join in and lots of people read it, and you know, I try and follow as many disabled people as I can and retweet what they say, and I think it's just another use. I think one of the big things as well, which is quite useful, is so many non-disabled people have come up to me and said, we didn't realise. So what's kind of exciting, I tweet a lot about trains because I use a lot of them. But, you know, I've had lots of non-disabled people say, I noticed a wheelchair user got stuck on the train, so I stood in the doors and didn't let the train leave. And you go, brilliant, because that means that it's educating people at the same time, which is really important.
Yeah, this is it's really interesting. Again, Emily and I were talking about this earlier, is as an able person who is obviously, I'm obviously more than most people, I'm more aware than most of issues surrounding wheelchair use and accessibility, but still I find myself often not sure whether I should offer help. Should I hang back if I see someone in the supermarket who can't reach something or can't open a heavy door, trains, going about London on the bus? It's very hard to know when to step in and possibly it's patronising, or whether to stand back and be unhelpful. So I spend a lot of time reading and absorbing what people like you two are saying and reading the responses and try and inform how I react and respond. So it's as useful for able people, I think, as it is for other wheelchair users. So while we're on accessibility, obviously the trains is a big thing, and the other thing which I know reoccurs time and time again is toilets. It's not a pleasant conversation, but we all know that it's really important. Emily, I don't know, have you had experience of this where you're out, you finally find somewhere you can go, there's a ramp or there's a lift, you're in, and you can't get to the toilet? Is this a regular issue that you encounter as well?
I mean, I think it largely depends on where you are in terms of, you know, I tend to find some places like museums, that kind of place, tend to be better. With restaurants, I tend to find sometimes it's a bit of a problem. There's a well-known food chain in Newcastle where the disabled toilet is actually up 2 flights of stairs, which I appreciate. You know, some disabled people can climb the stairs, but let's make the disabled toilet inclusive of all disabilities. It doesn't seem too difficult. And yeah, I think what a lot of people don't realise is that actually, you know, it's hard to say, but I think a lot of people think that there's not many people who will be using the toilet, and you can see this in places where you'll go into the toilet and it'll be full of cleaning equipment. That's a classic. Yeah. I think people think, oh, well, hardly any disabled people come here, so we can use it as a store cupboard.
Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, I've broken.
Yeah, and then presumably, and then there isn't room. I think what people don't realise is you need to be able to get in, you need to be able to turn around, you need to be able to park your wheelchair next to it. You know, it's not just a room. It's not just a big door with a logo on the front. There's a bit more to it than that. And if there's their stockpile of toilet roll that they bought from Macro, leaving none for the rest of us, that's an issue. It's a wasted resource. And what about and housing as well is another thing. I know my husband's an architect, and I read earlier that your father was an architect.
Yeah.
As well. So you just absorb that. You know, I've watched my husband incorporating DDA access regulations into everything he does. It's just part of his, he just doesn't even think about it. But is there more to be done? Because I'm aware that it's new buildings, fine, but how many of us live in a brand new building? How many of us go to the pub or the restaurant or the cinema in a brand new building? Not many, and it's only really been around since 2002. Is there more that we should be doing in that area?
Oh, loads more. I mean, so, you know, I grew up in a world where there was no accessible toilets and you didn't see disabled people out and about, and they were locked away in care homes. So, you know, that had a positive influence. One of my birthdays, he gave me part M of the building regs, which is not terribly exciting, but, you know, they're really out of date. And the absolute basic minimum standards. So, you know, I get why, you know, a 1,000-year-old castle might not be able to have a ramp, but actually should have a toilet. But, you know, there's no excuse. And where I get really frustrated was when, especially office blocks, you know, if I go to a friend's house that's not terribly accessible, that's my choice to go there. But, you know, new office blocks, they should be accessible, and you should go in and out through the same entrance that everyone else is. Yeah. I had an experience a little while ago where I was, I sat on a board of an organisation, and they'd organised a board dinner, and they'd said to me, oh, we'll go for dinner the night before the meeting, and oh, by the way, it's not an accessible restaurant, but it's a really nice restaurant. And I said, I'm not going. And so they did move it, but then at the dinner, they made this big song and dance about, we would have been in a really nice restaurant, but Tanni wouldn't go there. until I sort of pointed out, and it's like, do I let it go? And I said, actually, no, the reason I didn't go there was because it's not accessible. It's not that I'm having a hissy fit about, you know, and it's things like that.
On the pavement, yeah.
And,
just
you know, I've not just suddenly turned up somewhere and gone, oh, by the way, I'm in a wheelchair. You know, I'm a wheelchair user. It's they knew, and it's things like that that are really frustrating. If I choose to go somewhere inaccessible with my family, that is my choice. But certainly in the work environment, you know, I'm definitely, you know, because I'm old enough, I've had people book meetings in inaccessible rooms to make it deliberately difficult for me to get there. You know, and you go, do you really? You know, come on,
really?
stop it. Yeah, stop it. So, but I'm quite stubborn, so you know, it's fine. It's just, but it's not that. I think that could be very off-putting for a lot of people, you know, and it's just not acceptable to behave in this way anymore.
No, not at all. In terms of housing, so Emily, I know you're living with friends at the moment. Is it hard for you to find? You're obviously young, so I presume you're renting. You're not a homeowner yet, I'm assuming.
No.
Is it hard for you to find somewhere to rent with friends?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, like, you know, like there's always, depends on your disability as to what you'll need. But for me, I would need in a home as like a standard, I'd need step-free access, either a stair lift or a ground floor property. I'd need space underneath the hobs if I wanted to cook a meal, and I'd need a walk-in shower or a wet room, which really aren't that like complicated things. They're not structural, but literally you just can't find them. You might find one of those features, but they haven't got them all. And so I've been looking, you know, I keep an eye on kind of Rightmove, things like that. And I've been doing that for a couple of years now, and I'm yet to see one that has all of those things. Of course, if you own your home, you might have the means to make those changes. But if you're not, then you're stuck in this cycle of either having to rely on other people to do things like cook meals for you, or even, you know, like help you with washing and things like that, which as a 24-year-old, I'm not massively keen to do if I can do it myself. So yeah, it's really hard, and it's like, of course, like you said, I want to live with friends, and I don't want to be like seen as the person who's a bit of a burden, like they have to cook my meals for me. I just want to be a normal 24-year-old.
Yeah. Of course you do. And do you find it as a normal 24-year-old? I know for lockdown you're living with friends, which I hope it's quite fun, really, in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. Sounds awesome. I'd love to be with a group of friends. No, I'm joking. I love my family, really. But in normal life, when you're allowed out, and we're allowed out again, do you find it difficult being part of a social group of able friends where you're the only, or I presume you're one of the only wheelchair users within your circle of friends? Have there been moments when you feel like you're holding them back, or you're somehow, is that an issue you face?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky with the friends I do have. They're very considerate, but there are always going to be times where, because of poor accessibility, there might be somewhere they want to go, and I don't ever want to be the person who's stopping them from going, but then they feel bad, and it, you know, and even just things like, it's hard for the people to know how much preparation has to go into something. So I can't just say, oh yeah, let's go for a meal, we'll decide where we go and we'll get into town. I have to know where we're going, ring them up, see if I've not been there before, see if it's accessible, can I get into the toilet, you know, things like that. Because sometimes in some restaurants, for example, they'll only have one table which is wheelchair accessible, and if that table's been booked, then you can't go. So yeah, I've definitely felt like that. I think I was saying earlier actually that having a disability, I think it's helped me to realise who my friends are, which is quite nice. But yeah, it is hard because you don't want to be the person who's holding other people back.
It just makes me realise that I've been quite horrified hearing some of these stories, and obviously the thing with the trains, which I know is a recurring issue for you, Tanni, and thought that Emily can't rent a flat with her friends just on such a basic level. You know, finding somewhere to live. It seems to me that the attitudes have really shifted into a really positive place. There's obviously still a long way to go, and I know representation is still really slow to catch up in sort of media and terms, but the nuts and bolts of accessibility doesn't really seem to have improved at all. Are we missing a trick as a legislatively, is that a word? Why is it still so hard? What's not happening?
I think disability just gets forgotten. We're always kind of the bottom of the list. I think legislation's hard to get through, so unless the government of the day is really keen to push legislation, it doesn't happen. You know, private members' bill is almost impossible to get through. So there's lots of challenges to put in legislation. You know, when the original DDA came out, you know, it was kind of pretty much the bare minimum of what they could get through. You know, it didn't fix everything. So I think there's lots of hope that, you know, hearts and minds will get businesses to think differently, but the reality is that a lot don't. And unless they're challenged, they don't, you know, and actually what Emily's saying, you know, housing, you know, is more, everything is more expensive if you're disabled. You know, especially if you live in big cities, to live somewhere, I mean, let's say London, to live somewhere near accessible transport, to live near an accessible tube station is really expensive. So, you know, just it's the constant cost that just keeps going up and up, which just makes it really difficult. So yeah, we do need better legislation, but we also need companies just to, you know, wake up, because actually I think what we're seeing now, there's always been a purple pound, you know, where disabled people have chosen how to spend their money, you know, and amongst, you know, there's a lot of people disabled because they get older. There's a lot of disposable income out there, and, you know, people will, as they find out more and through, you know, social and stuff, find out more of the companies that do well and do badly. That's how they'll choose to spend their money. So it's not about doing us a favour, because I'm a bit bored of that. It's about actually just being sensible businesses. So yeah, we need to do, everyone needs to be more and better. Yeah.
And I guess that an element of that, the most useful thing we can all do is to keep shouting about it. Is that the best thing we can do? Just to keep on sharing your negative experiences, naming, shaming, retweeting, just make lots of noise. Is that the best thing we can do?
I think so. I mean, I think for me, if I complained every time I experienced discrimination, I'd spend half my life complaining. So I don't necessarily want to fill in a form every time, you know, that I experience something. And, you know, with my issues with trains, you know, I said, have you filled in a form? And it's like, well, what's going to change if I fill in a form? You know, so I did have one train company, it's really funny, that sent me a message to tell me stop tweeting about trains. And I included them in every tweet for 48 hours, whether it was regarding them or not. To the point my sister got in touch and said, you're right, you're getting really boring now. Like, okay. But it's like, I might say, sorry, you telling me as an individual I can't tweet about you? Or, you know, I wasn't tweeting made up stuff. You know, you telling me as a member of the House of Lords I can't tweet? Well, what you do? So, yeah, it gets exhausting, because the big discrimination stuff is easy to complain about. It's the low level. What you were saying earlier about offering help, you know, I think it's great if someone offers to help me, brilliant. But if I say, I'm fine, thanks very much, but thanks for asking, that is it, go away. You know, what's really annoying is when somebody ignores me, and then I've had it where I've said no to someone, and they've just randomly started pushing me down the street. And it's literally like, well, you know, that's kind of assault, actually, because if you just went up to a non-disabled woman and grabbed her arm and started pulling her down the street, bit creepy.
Yeah.
But, so even if a disabled person looks like they're struggling or they are struggling, but if they say no, I'm fine, you walk away. You know.
Have you ever been in a situation where you feel scared and vulnerable because you're a woman, maybe particularly, and in a wheelchair?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. And Emily, have you found that as well?
Yeah, I think it's an assumed vulnerability sometimes as well. It's not necessarily that I am vulnerable. It's some of it will be to do with the fact I'm a woman. Some of it will be the fact that I have a disability. I think some of it is like even just, oh, are you sure you should be doing that because you're in a wheelchair? Is it safe for you to be out? You know, and that's the idea that needs to be challenged as well. That we aren't vulnerable. I mean, I'm as likely to be vulnerable as anybody else. You know, everyone has things going on, but we don't need to assume that just because I need to use a wheelchair to get around, that automatically makes me a vulnerable person. For example, we were talking earlier about walking home from places, particularly maybe at night. Well, already it's more difficult for women because it's assumed that it's not safe, but then add the wheelchair into the mix and it's like, oh gosh, that's a massive no-go. But we need to be gently challenging that as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had people definitely say, you know, should you be out at this time of night? It's like 6:30, you know, or, you know, I mean, there's been some really different, I mean, certainly when I was pregnant, I've talked about this quite publicly, you know, I had a lot of people who said people like me shouldn't be allowed to have children.
Oh.
And, you know, so my response to that is, what, Welsh people? Sorry, did you mean wheelchair user? Okay. So, but you can't use humour all the time, you know.
No, it's exhausting as well. You can't stay upbeat, but that's horrible thing to say.
What makes people think they can say some of this stuff, you know? But then there's a lot of very strange people in the world, you know. So, yeah.
There are, and everybody meets them from time to time. But I'm sure you get more than your fair share. And it must be exhausting. I can only imagine it's exhausting. And if you are not naturally a combative sort of person, do you find, I mean, maybe Emily, this for you, I'm just thinking because of your relative youth, if I may, it feels like you must have to fight against so many things every day. It's just exhausting. Attitudes, lack of ramps, rights to access things, jobs, getting around. Do you sometimes find it exhausting, or do you feel it's made you become that person because of what you're constantly facing?
I think there's a bit of a mix of both. Some days it is exhausting, and I don't want to look at Twitter because more people are DMing me asking me, can you share this awful thing that's happened to me, because you know, and sometimes mentally that can just be so exhausting, especially when you're seeing how much it's happened to other people as well as yourself. And even just like the planning to go anywhere, sometimes I'd rather just stay at home with Netflix, because it's just, you know, it is tiring. But I would say that actually in my case, and this isn't the case for everybody, it's really like kind of made me become a more confident person, which I would say is a positive thing. I think some of my friends find it quite funny that I am now this person who's been on television and whatever. And sometimes I speak on my local radio about disability issues and things. And it's not really, I was quite shy before, it's not really who I was at one point. And I think that is one of the positive things that's come out of this. I am more confident to speak for myself and what I need and what other disabled people want and need as well. But it is worth saying that, you know, just because if somebody's watching this and they're thinking, oh, I don't really share what's happened to me, and does that make me, you know, not a valid disabled person or good at, you know, should I be fighting? I would say the answer is absolutely not. Like, you have to do what's right for you. It's not your duty to save all disabled people and make the world better, because it's actually other people's problem and the way that they perceive things. So it's the right thing for me quite often to share my things, but it is an exhausting thing to be involved in, and it's not for everybody, and not everyone feels they have the capacity to do that. So I think that's still important to mention as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I don't think you should feel as though you're have to be responsible for other people's instance, and other people's, certainly not for other people's responses to things as well. You can't be responsible for that. And you have become a sort of an activist and an advocate. I don't know whether you wandered into that accidentally or whether that was intentional, but it's amazing what you have achieved. I think the other thing that it makes me aware of, talking to both of you, you know, intelligent, articulate women who can stand up for yourselves, is the many people out there who might not be able to fight their corner. Tanni, I don't know whether you've got anything to jump in on this, but I'm aware that all the people I'm speaking to throughout this event are the people who have stuck their elbows out and have made the best of their situation and are living their best life and are advocates, and they've got loud voices. But what about all those people who just, for whom this is not their natural way? Are they just being ignored? Are they just at home? It's terrifying.
Yeah, there's lots of people who are being ignored, and I think it's really difficult. I think it's what Emily said, is like, it's not for everybody to kind of shout loudly, and even the people who choose to, you know, some days I'm feeling really up for a fight and other days I'm just exhausted by it. So even within what I do, you know, there's ups and downs for it. So you know, what I would say to disabled people is, you know, try and find other people like-minded. There are amazing bits of social media where you can link to other people who are going through the same things. There's also some quite horrible bits, but you know, you won't be the only person going through it. So, you know, what's been interesting through the stuff I tweet about trains is people saying to me, I thought it was just me. You know, I thought it was just, this is how I got treated. And it's like, well, I don't think it helps, but it's lots of disabled people get treated like that. So yeah, it's finding people to share it with is really important, and ultimately do what's right for you. And that's the most important thing. You know, everyone will find that their own voice at some point, and that's important.
I can't thank you enough. I'm aware that I've taken up a lot of your time, and no doubt you've got A-levels to resolve, imaginary nights out to plan. Maybe you could both leave us and the lovely attendees at the show with one last bit of advice. If you are facing an accessibility issue, what is the best thing you can do?
For me, it's, do you know what? Find other like-minded people. You know, if you don't feel up for complaining, find someone else who'll do it, you know, and if you can, challenge it, because the only way it will change is if people don't put up with it. And that can be lots of different ways, but yeah, just try and find a way through it, because, you know, we just deserve better. I mean, that's the reality, is that you know, we deserve to have the same access to everything that everyone else does, and at the minute we don't. What I say about my experience with trains is I want the same miserable experience of commuting as everyone else, and I don't yet have it. So I will shut up when I get the same miserable experience, and people laugh, and then they go, oh. So yeah, same miserable experience. I'm not sure it's going to take on as a hashtag, but, you know, maybe.
Emily, have you got any last words, last thoughts for us?
I mean, yeah, I absolutely agree with what Tanni said. I think one thing that's been absolutely so important for me is to meet other people, whether that's online or in person. It tends to be online, who have experienced similar things to me. And the other thing I'd probably just add is that, like, just remember that you are as worthy as anybody else. If that's all you can do, if all you can think is, okay, in this scenario, I haven't been treated well. However, I know that I am equal, and I have worth just like anybody else. Like, that, sometimes that's all you can do. All you can do is kind of remind yourself of that truth. And look up people like Tanni online and see that there are people who are wanting to change this. Not everybody is going to sit back and watch this happen. So I would say watch this space, because I think lots of exciting things are going to continue to happen.
Yeah, let's hope things are going to start moving. Well, meanwhile, keep safe. I don't need to remind you to stay at home. Of all the audiences in the world, I know that you're all doing it anyway. Thank you so much to Emily. Thank you so much to you, Tanni. And to everyone out there, I hope this has been helpful and, dare I say, inspirational. I'm sorry, I had to go there. So find your tribe, keep fighting, whether it's for yourself or a friend or for a child you're looking after. And don't go away, because 7 o'clock there is an adaptive dance class happening here with the fabulous Kate Stanforth, another Geordie. What is it about you Geordie women? Don't mess with a Geordie woman in a wheelchair. I'm telling you what, they'll come for you. She's awesome. She's also very funny. So if you're rubbish at dancing, just pour yourself a glass of wine and start laughing. So that's happening here at 7 o'clock. Get your dancing shoes on. Meanwhile, thank you all very, very much. Good night.
Thank you.